Hi, and welcome to Thursday Comics. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, The Adventures of Adam Star and the Solar Legion. I'm also the author of WITCHMAN, a new superhero comic book which recently had a successful Kickstarter campaign. So we're up to The Mighty Thor number 140, The Growing Man. Really nice Jack Kirby cover with a big, cool-looking robot for Thor to tangle with. And we're coming off of a 2 or 3 year period of just, some of Jack Kirby's greatest comics of all time. Just this really fun, inventive, continuing epic that went from issue to issue, culminating in the Great Troll War, the war between the trolls and the Asgardian gods, The Mighty Thor, The Growing Man, in which one of Earth's deadliest enemies returns with the most uncanny threat of all. Let it be known, the Great Troll War has been won by the forces of Asgard. Now, amidst the most celestial pomp and pageantry, the regal Odin victoriously ascends to the Golden Throne, conceived and created by the noblest collaborative combo in comicdom, Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby. Inking by Vince Colletta, lettering by Sam Rosen. The stage is set, the curtain is risen, the cast assembled. Let the wonderment begin. So we had the full story of the Troll War, and here is the epilogue, the denouement. All hail to him who is highest of the highest. All this sort of pageantry, this sort of victory lap, just with beautiful drawing and costuming. They're celebrating. Hail Asgard. Odin is triumphant. He's relaxing in the royal baths, in the royal schwitz. Thor is visiting him and saying, look, I got to go back to Earth. Asgard's safe. I need to get back there. That's, the place I'm sworn to protect. And so we cut to this storyline of this expedition where they found, the day before, they found a tiny figure buried in the earth. And now that figure has grown to giant proportions. And it wakes up and goes on the attack. So it's a rampaging robot story. A little bit of a come down from the just endless innovation and excitement that we've seen in the previous issues. It feels like a little bit of a return to form, a return to sort of a previous status quo of Thor, where he'd fight like a villain of the week, and it would be exciting, there'd be cool action scenes, but it wasn't elevated to the heights that some of the stories we've been recently reading were. So this robot's on the rampage. And Thor's going to go back home, and he's going to leave Sif in Asgard. He needs some time by himself, and he's sort of, the heart of Thor is still heavy laden with thoughts of the now departed Jane Foster. So, he had a bad breakup. He met Sif and fell instantly, madly, deeply in love, but now kind of realizes that was probably to do with his emotions and sadness over the breakup of his long engagement with Jane Foster, and he realizes that now, and realizes that he needs some time alone, that maybe there is a future for him and Sif, but for the time being, he needs some time alone to think about it. Odin sends him back to Earth. Beautiful shot. Kirby has this really nice way of drawing a character in flight and then putting the background, this highly detailed background, in some, very askew angle that just gives you like a sense of vertigo and motion. Really great. He gets back to his office, hits the hammer, and he's back. He's looking in the mirror. My face is the face of a scholar, a healer, a dedicated man of peace. And yet, even as mighty Thor has dedicated his life to fighting evil, so have I dedicated mine to fighting the ills and ailments that afflict mankind. Perhaps that is the reason destiny has chosen me to play the most fateful secret role of all. And we've seen this kind of story before in Thor. He goes away for a while, and then he comes back to Earth, and, the bills and the mail have piled up at Don Blake's doctor's office, and people wonder, like, whatever happened to him. Except this time, there's an added vacuum that, Jane Foster's completely out of the picture. The police are putting out a dragnet trying to find this giant robot. They're in full battle with him. This really recalls the Absorbing Man stories, that the things that sort of marked the beginning of of sort of the great era of Thor comics. So we're kind of taking a step back there. And I do wonder, like why the brakes were put on the innovation at this point. And so this robot's looking for his master, and his master is revealed. It's Kang. He's shrunken the robot back down to a smaller size. To me, it's sort of, when you're pacing a comic, it does make sense to me at some point, as you go more and more cosmic and more and more towards, grandeur, you're going to reach sort of like an upper limit where if you keep pushing forward, you're going to have diminished returns. And it's almost like a rubber band that's being stretched very far. And you kind of have to like go back to basics or go back to earth for a little bit, go small, and kind of build things back up to your next arc. So I wonder if it's just sort of that basic storytelling instinct, that sort of very natural feeling rhythm is why we're going sort of back to the old formula and back to an older villain, a villain that Thor encountered in one of the earliest issues of the Avengers with Kang. And then I also wonder, maybe it's an editorial thing. Maybe Martin or Stan were kind of like, okay, this is getting a little out of hand and a little hard to follow. Let's maybe get back to some sort of, Monster of the Week stuff or Monster of the Month stuff, that's a little easier for the kids to follow. Or it could also be that there is definitely a point in Jack's tenure at Marvel in the 60s where he deliberately decides to start withholding ideas, that he feels for various reasons that his ideas are not being rewarded, and that other people, Martin Goodman and Stan, are getting rich and famous from his ideas and sort of, claiming ownership of them. And so he sort of starts to hold back. And it makes sense because around this time he is working on what will become the New Gods. And it seemed like the Troll War was sort of leading towards that. The Thor comic was basically becoming the New Gods. And maybe this is when he decides to put on the brakes. Now, Kirby's comics, he's putting the brakes on a little bit, but still this robot is a new character. I mean, it's kind of basic, giant rampaging robot, but it's still a new character. But we're going to reach a point where Kirby like really slams the brakes. So we're not there yet. So maybe this is like an early slowdown before that big dry spell. Don Blake makes his way there, turns into Thor, joins in the battle. Also, the absence of Jane Foster is really felt. Like, this is talking about the status quo. It almost takes us back to the status quo of the first issue of Thor, where it is just Don Blake turning into Thor and fighting fighting some sort of monster or monsters, and having no real life, just sort of him by himself before Jane Foster's introduced in, I think, like the second issue. This fight goes on. It's a pretty great fight. And this does become sort of the standard Marvel formula. And it also becomes Kirby's standard formula when he's kind of either, trying to concoct the next great idea or withholding ideas. He seems to go all in these just like amazing battles, this epic battle, but a battle without any real stakes. There's no danger. Again, Jane Foster was a built-in way to get some real stakes and get you to really care about things. He doesn't seem to have any sort of grudge with this, essentially this robot, but he does have a grudge with Kang. They have tangled before in his role in the Avengers. It's also, I think, in Jack Kirby's time at Marvel in the 60s, he also did sort of reach a point where he was providing, all the storylines, and, he'd read, these articles about what a genius Stan Lee is, and he'd sort of approach Stan Lee with the attitude of, and maybe not the exact words, but with the attitude of, okay, Stan, you're the genius of the world. How about you come up with the story for this issue? And I wonder if maybe this is one of those, like, it does feel like we're hearkening back to a prior era, to, those early issues of the Avengers. And in the past couple years of Thor's universe has become its own, like, incredibly interesting universe, separate from the larger Marvel universe. And at the same time, in Fantastic Four and in the other books, that Marvel universe has been developing. And so as Thor is delving into its own mythology, its own universe, Fantastic Four is delving into its own universe. The Marvel thing of the 60s, at this point in 1967, has been around enough years for a sort of like nostalgia to set in about those earliest days. And I feel like this is like, hey, let's spend a little bit of time with that old school Marvel formula that everybody's clamoring for. Let's spend a little time. Let's step out of Thor's universe for a little bit and step into the larger Marvel universe. And I do find the Marvel universe very compelling, but I find Thor's personal universe, the universe developed in these stories, I find it so much more interesting, so much more compelling. And so a story like this that taps into, the other stuff, I'm not as into. After Kirby leaves, all the Thor stuff just becomes fuel for the larger Marvel universe. And so it does work as a palate cleanser. And unfortunately, we get 2 issues like this in a row. We get this and the next issue are almost identical, involving a sort of robot with no personality that is basically robbing banks or on a crime spree or whatever. We get 2 issues in a row of that, and so it does feel pretty weak compared to what we'd been getting previously. But when you have a surprise villain, it usually should be, somebody who's already been established, and Kang was definitely established. Kang escapes into his time machine. Thor throws his hammer around it, and in the dialogue, it lets you know that Thor has, sent him to exile in limbo. And so nothing too special here. This is still, better than anybody else's best, but we're comparing Kirby to Kirby. Next, the mystery of Replicus. My memory of these issues kind of blurs together because Replicus is almost identical to the robot we meet here. So the main story is feeling a little bit tired, a little bit uninspired, but again, maybe that's just what's called for at this point in sort of the rhythm, the ups and downs of serialized narrative. But Tales of Asgard is still firing on all cylinders. The battle begins. We get this giant fist of the Ginny slamming down. Thor throws his hammer at him. Lots of action, great poses. Hogun goes into battle. Then he's grabbed. Fandral stabs at the monster's hand, gets Hogun free. Now the Ginny Devil is raging, shooting destruction out of his fingertips. And we cut back to Mogul. He's got like a really cool entourage around him, and he has a collection of battle standards that he's taken from kingdoms that he's conquered. And so among them is the battle standard of Hogun's people, and that's going to come into play in later installments of this story. And then there's some, sort of Lord of the Rings kind of stuff where the Ginny Devil dawdles too long, and then the sun sets, and if he's outside when the sun sets, he fades away, disappears, kind of like in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, when trolls are outside at sunrise, they turn to stone. So it's kind of that sort of Deus Ex Machina, kind of, getting us out of this fun fight scene and on to the next thing as they walk down these incredibly steep and cool-looking steps, just a great camera angle there, into the underground world of Xanadu. And next, Alibar and the 40 Demons. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, The Adventures of Adam Starr and the Solar Legion. I'm also the author of WITCHMAN, a new superhero comic book, which recently had a successful Kickstarter campaign. I'll see you next Thursday.